And what is up, everyone? I am Joe DeHoyos. I'm host of Beyond the Woodline. Tonight we have a recorded show, so you guys are going to be watching it. Don't comment. I mean, you can comment. You just won't get a response from either one of us. Um, if you do have questions, of course, you can post it, and one of us will try to get back to it. If I don't have the answer, I'll ask Jill for it, and she'll we'll supply an answer for you that way. But real quick before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that I have I'm part of the Gemini Research Group, which is it's a Bigfoot research group, and we have teams all over the country. So if you guys have any questions, any issues, any uh, concerns regarding Bigfoot, you need someone to come over and check it out or help you out, or you just want to talk to someone and tell your story. We have people like in Ohio, Michigan, Florida, uh, Maine, Maryland, California, and of course here in Texas. And I know I'm probably missing a couple of other states, but if we don't have anyone in your state, we can certainly find somebody for you. Oh, Oklahoma, we have someone in Oklahoma also. We can certainly find somebody for you. And you just contact me at beyond.woodline@gmail.com. And if you're interested in being part of the team, hit me up too. We can use all the help we can get. You're not necessarily obligated to go out into the field. So if you can do work from behind the computer, find encounters, find witnesses, uh, or find histories of places. We understand that not everybody can get out into the field. So with all that being said, I have with me tonight Jill Weaver. Jill, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Uh, Man, it seemed like we had quite the issue tonight, but I think we got it squared away, right? Um,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah. And for you guys, this is Jill. Jill, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you, if you don't
Oh, yeah, I have kind of a varied history. I, like a lot of people, kind of started out in the paranormal world and just started running into so much high strangeness along the way that now I consider myself an investigator of all sorts of phenomena. And I am actually interested in joining maybe one of your Bigfoot teams at some point, and learn to venture into the woods. That's probably the one area of spooky stuff that still kind of is unnerving to me. I've been like formally, officially ghost hunting since probably about 2010 when I joined a team. After watching all the ghost shows on TV, it became all the rage to do. I had had some strange experiences throughout my life that got me kind of, wondering and, just wanted to kind of look at it from a more scientific standpoint. And then from there, I ended up creating my own team, Sci Minds Paranormal. We were grouped in the Indiana area, central Indiana. We had a local chapter of MUFON open up in the state after a few years, and I joined that as a field investigator as well. A lot of my other teammates joined. And then from there, I became a chief investigator for MUFON, Indiana, a position I held I think I held it for less than a year before I stepped down. Things started getting really weird in my life connected to that. And it seemed that the more that I delved into the UFO phenomena, the stranger things got. So I sort of backed away from that for a while and just kind of went back to, just plain old ghost hunting.
mind? Yeah, that's yeah. I started out doing the Bigfoot thing, right? And along the line, I just got more and more into the paranormal, more into the UFOs and alien stuff, which is where I got the name Beyond the Woodline, because from a Bigfoot researcher, there's more out there, beyond the woodline.
Mhm.
And I've actually had a lot of paranormal experiences, and I've had two UFO sightings, and oddly enough, no Bigfoot sighting, and I've been doing that for 10 years, right? So that's just the way it works, right? But I've got a lot of good evidence of vocals and signs and even footprints, and it's just something that I really enjoy doing. And I think that's important that if you're going to have, I don't really want to call it a hobby, but because it's not like a hobby, it's more than that, right? Um, so if you're gonna do something like that, and you might as well love it and enjoy what you're doing. And I love it. There's nothing like being out in the woods, even if we don't get any activity. At least we're sitting around a campfire with good company and
Mhm.
good, that's what I tell everybody. That's what it's all about, I think.
That's what all of it is about. I always talk to people and they don't realize that all of this investigating is actually a very social activity.
Right. Yeah, and
You know, we
there's a lot of
you're sitting in a paranormal, haunted place or whatever. You're just sitting around kind of quietly talking and observing what's going on, and that to me is the best part of it.
right. And in all honesty, some of my best friends are in the Bigfoot world. Some of these guys that I'll be friends with for the rest of my life, they're guys that I've met in the Bigfoot world. And there's a couple of guys that I've met because of their encounters that I'm like really good friends with now, and I'll always be friends with them. Um, Walter is one of them, for example. I met him almost 3 years ago after he had an encounter, and he contacted me, and he happens to live in the area. So, man, we've become really, really good friends, and we talk all the time. We talk today, as a matter of fact. Uh, just a real quick, interesting, funny little story. I was getting into my truck this morning. It was like 7:30, and putting my backpack in my truck, getting ready to go. And the area of town that I live in, everyone like walks their dogs or goes jogging in the morning and walking in the morning. It's one of those kind of neighborhoods. This guy was walking and he stops and he's like, "Hey, have you seen a Bigfoot?" And I'm like, "No, but I've talked to a lot of people who've seen it." I told him I have a podcast actually. And he goes, "Yeah, I see your stickers on your truck." He goes, "And I've always wanted to ask you about it." And I was like, "Well, yeah, man." I said, "You ever want to talk about Bigfoot, man? Come stop by." And he says, "Well, my coworker's sister saw one." And I'm like, "Well, dude, tell me about it. What do you know?" And he's like, "She just said that she was driving through a wooded area and it walked out in front of her car." And I said, "Well, what kind of details did she get?" He said, "She said it was really big, really hairy." He goes, "But she said it had broad shoulders and that it kind of walked hunched over, you know, and that it just kept on walking and just walked right into the wood line again." And that was the last time, only time she saw it. And real quick encounter, but I told him, I said, "Well, dude, you got to give me her number or give her my number, and I'd love to talk to her." So those stickers on my truck come in handy sometimes, and people ask me about it. And it's always fun when friends and family come up to you and they're like, "Hey, you're into all this stuff. This happened to me, right?" And it's always fun, or they know people who have had encounters with, whatever paranormal, UFOs, or Bigfoot, and it's always fun to be that guy. Does that ever happen to you?
All the time. We always talk about, people who there tends to be this perception sort of in the real world out there that, all of us are kooks and nuts, and and people will say those things, but on a one-to-one basis, as soon as they know you're a paranormal researcher, whatever, they always have a story. They always want to tell you a ghost story, a UFO story, whatever. So I think that people actually believe, but they don't think that it's socially acceptable to let anybody know that they do. And yeah, there's just so many personal experiences out there, and you can tell people just really want to tell somebody, but they just don't know who. And so when you give them that opportunity, I mean, just like sometimes the floodgates open. People are just they just have been keeping some of these things in for years or
Yeah,
for decades even. And I find
right,
that kind of a sad commentary that it's almost, I think, kind of a disinformation campaign. When I was with MUFON, I mean, the standing joke was that, it was the CIA that started National Enquirer because they wanted to be able to collect all these reports, go
right,
squash them, and then basically ridicule the people that had come forward with their stories.
right,
And, when I was a MUFON investigator, we got a few pranks. I mean, we had one hoax, and it was pretty obvious that it was a hoax, and we squashed that right away. But I would say probably 99% or even almost 99.5% were genuine, hardworking, normal people that happened to be, sitting outside in the dark, smoking a cigarette. An awful lot of smokers have sightings,
right,
or, just people who happen to notice something. And Many of them mulled it over for days, weeks, years, decades before they finally, filed a report. They were afraid to come forward. I mean, these are not all, kooks and nuts and, whatever the common person thinks. I interviewed police officers, firemen, nurses, doctors, scientists. I had one report, and the gentleman had to remain anonymous because he said he literally was a rocket scientist. He had a top security clearance. He was a rocket scientist. He saw a craft that put out a vapor trail, almost like donut shaped. It put out like these round puffs of
Oh, wow.
smoke. And he said and at the time with his security clearance, he was well aware of cutting edge terrestrial craft. And he said he mulled that over, and that bothered him for 10 years because he could not figure out what type of engine system that would have been that would have created that type of a contrail. I mean, he just went into it, deeply scientifically and, academically, and he could not explain it. And that's when he filed his report. He said, I had to tell somebody needed to know about this.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I think people think it's just like a bunch of crazy hillbillies that see these things, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and even though you have simple folk who do see this stuff, you also have, like I said, the police officers, judges,
Mm-hmm.
lawyers. Uh, I know a surgeon that moved here to Texas just so he could research Bigfoot because he had an encounter, in one of his states, and then he found out that Bigfoot was pretty prevalent here in Texas. So he moved to Texas. And you're talking, a
Interesting.
surgeon. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I think there's some misconceptions about who the witnesses are, uh, and you're right about people holding it in for decades because I know people who haven't even like told their wife for like 20 years, because of the ridicule that they faced when they first had this encounter. Um, I spoke to a gentleman a few years ago, and he's been married, and I don't know, 30 something years, 32, 33 years now, and he's never told his wife about his encounters. And his encounter, his second encounter, actually scared him so bad he urinated himself. And as a matter of fact, me and my friend were talking about that today. That when someone tells you that, look, I urinated myself, that's uh, that's pretty serious, to scare a grown man, a hunter who's in the woods, who has a rifle on him, and he gets that scared. But and for them to hold it in that long, it's just, I think, like you said, society really, labels people as some kind of kook or crazy person, and then of course you
And
have
that,
the
and that, yeah,
ridicule.
and that's so, I mean, it's so unfortunate because people are carrying this sense of, I mean, it was a terrifying event, and now they're carrying a sense of shame and everything else with it, and that's just totally needless. I'm sure people have PTSD as a result of it.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't think I
Yeah.
would ever go back if I saw
Yeah.
something.
So, like, I hate to mention Walter, but Walter will tell you too that when he first contacted me, he actually contacted Will Jevning first, and then Will told me, "Hey, there's a guy in your area." So I called up Walter, and we got together. And I went to his house. We met up, and he's like, "Okay, I'll take you to the location." So we went out there, and we're good. And this is a long road. I mean, maybe 6, 7 miles back into the woods. And when we got about, I don't know, a half a mile from his location, I mean, he's white knuckling his steering wheel, right? And he's like, his eyes are shifting all over the place. We get to the area, we get off the car, and he has his head on a swivel. And it's the daylight. It's in the middle of the daytime. I mean, maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He's like spinning around looking. He hears every little pop. He's like spinning around. And this guy, he was in recon. He was a Marine. And he's like spinning around, and he's like, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" And he had some serious PTSD. And his girlfriend at the time, she could walk up on him and like scare him like that. The poor guy. But going out there a few times, and as many times as we've gone out there with him, he said that actually helped him get over it. Even though he's still kind of jumpy, he's not near as bad as he was at the beginning.
A little bit of
And then
desensitization.
right, and I talked to a guy last week, and he was like so relieved to talk to somebody who believed him. And I think that's very important for people, for witnesses. And when you have a strange encounter, and this goes for anyone who's not. It just doesn't have to be Bigfoot. UFOs and paranormal. When they're able to talk to someone who believes them or who can relate to that, it helps them out. That's part of the reason why I do this show too, because I think uh, when other people hear that other people experience this stuff, it helps them out in the long run. So that's one reason why I do that too, just to get some let people know that they're not alone.
I think it is very therapeutic. And then, the investigator in me is, when you see somebody that is literally having the signs of PTSD, that can't be faked. I mean,
Right.
one of my witnesses, I investigated her case, and we later became friends. She was actively being abducted when I was, I'd come out to her house. She would call me and she'd say, "I think they're out tonight. I have," she would just get that feeling. And I'd go over to her house. Well, there was one particular instance. We were walking in the dark toward my car, and I used to have an old Honda Odyssey, and it had the sliding doors that you could trigger with your key. And we were getting close to the car, and I triggered the door, and so the door popped and the light came on. That woman about literally jumped out of her shoes. She had such an aggravated startle response, and you can't fake that. I mean, I knew that she was going through something extremely traumatic,
Right.
and yeah, that can't be faked. That's not normal.
Right. Yeah.
Any grown man should not be that fearful of a daylight walk in the woods, for example.
Yeah. 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 As we were leaving that area, and we were, I mean, it's like a little turnaround because there's only one way in, one way out. As we were pulling out, we're driving, and a squirrel runs across the road, and he locks them up. He locks his brakes up, and I was so glad I had my seatbelt on because I would have went through the windshield.
Oh
He's like,
my
"Oh,
gosh.
oh my god, oh my god," and we laugh about it now, but at the time, I mean, he was like, no, no shit, scared. But
He was triggered. Yeah, it was totally
yeah,
triggered him.
yeah. So as far as the ghost hunting and what got you started doing that? I mean, was there something that happened that got you pointed in that direction?
It wasn't one little thing. I would just say, like from a young age, I always was into all of the spooky unknown mysteries, unsolved mysteries, Fate magazine, all of that, Ripley's Believe It or Not, like all of that. I was just really drawn to that whole genre, and, including science fiction. So I always had that interest. I always had like a little bit of a belief. And I just started having I think we all have little things that happen to us, but what the difference is, do you notice? Do you actually pay attention? Do you start trying to piece these things together? Just little things. I was a teenager. I had a fight with my boyfriend one night. I remember we're sitting in my room, and I was so angry at him, and my picture that I had of him on my dresser like flew off and landed on the floor. So I was like, well, that was kind of odd.
Hmm.
Just a lot of little experiences like that. Probably, and I would say too that a lot of that can sort of merge with spirituality and other metaphysical beliefs. I had taken a trip to Egypt, and I went with my sister. We went into the Great Pyramid, which I'm telling you that is something that every person needs to experience. It's absolutely humbling when you climb into such a huge structure of these huge, pieces of stone, and when you enter the tomb, it's everybody just sort of whispers. You realize you're in this almost sort of like a sacred space. It's almost like a liminal space. Well, we had gone into the king's chamber, and then we exited, and most people just go into the king's chamber and leaves. But if you go a little bit further down that chamber, there's a side chamber, and it takes you into what's known as the queen's chamber, which it's pretty far away from the king's chamber. It's also at a downward angle, but it's not as finished. There was never any sarcophagus or anything found in it. It's basically an unfinished chamber. Now, I mean, this was back in the early 90s. So, you don't, this was before, Instagram and everybody, was going to the pyramid. It was usually just some pretty, diehard travelers. So there weren't a lot of people in the pyramid at that time. You have these 30-ton, granite slabs, sound isn't going to be, traveling or reverberating anywhere. And so it was just my sister and I, and we were climbing down, and she was ahead of me. And I heard clear as day someone whisper my name in my right ear. And it stopped me dead in my tracks. It absolutely stopped me. And I just said to my sister, I said, let's not go any further. I was incredibly creeped out. I mean, I'm in a foreign country, too. And there's not very many Jills. I don't think I ever told my sister what happened. And so that was kind of a real profound experience for me. And so I just kind of started watching for profound experiences and just watching for things that, were strange. I happened to have a real estate career I got into, and that was in the height of the foreclosure crisis. And this was in Indiana around 2008, 2009. So there were a lot of abandoned houses. Basically, houses would sit vacant for almost sometimes more than 2 years as they were going through the foreclosure process. And so I'd be showing these houses, which are definitely stigmatized, and I started having weird experiences in these houses. I would have camera malfunctions. I wouldn't be able to take pictures. I would take pictures. I would develop them. I'd see all kinds of like weird shapes in them. My very first listing, I had an electronic lockbox that detached itself. And my client called me and he said, your lockbox is over here hanging on a peg. And I said, how is that possible? I said, I had it locked to the security gate on the door. And he's like, I don't know. He goes, we just found it over here. and I went over and, I called the tech services. I said, how is it possible that my lockbox like detached itself? And they said, well, you must have given someone the shackle code. And I said, I'm a new agent. I don't even know what my shackle code is. I use my key to access it. And everybody just kind of shrugged. I was in the office. I'm asking other, agents, that have been there 30 or 40 years. And they're like, I don't know. It never happened to me. And well, I did a little digging, and it turned out that that listing of mine, it was for an investor client. And I called him up and I said, so how exactly did you get this house? He said, oh, I bought it at an auction. And he said, it was all trashed. We had, fixed it up, and then it got trashed again. And I said, what do you mean by trash? And he said, well, somebody had been in there and there was all kinds of, graffiti spray painted all over. And I think they had set a fire or whatever. And I was like, well, this is really like the definition of a stigmatized property. And that I actually had my camera malfunction in there too when I was trying to do my listing. And so I told my client, I said, my advice is, let's just get this, fixed up. I'll put a regular mechanical box on the house, and, let's just get this thing sold, because there's something kind of strange at work here. And we sold it. And then I drove past the house like a couple of weeks after closing, and the garage door was all wonky and a tree had fallen on it. So
That's
like, man, that house was just bad news. It was just bad news all the way around. So that's about the time I joined a team. And one of my first teammates actually turned out later to be one of my clients. I'd been showing this beautiful old Victorian house, and we were hearing footsteps and sounded like somebody else was in the house with us. And, we saw some things move, and my client said, did you see that? And I said, yeah, I saw it. I heard. And then, I would start carrying a K2 in my purse when I was doing these showings, just like before or after the clients would be there. I'm like, I'm just going to do a little test here. And, yeah, that Victorian house, I ended up going back probably about 3 or 4 times. And we would do showings, and we would just, sit there, and that place was amazing. It was so active. And I had the listing agent, of course, he was all excited because he thought, I had a buyer. And I said, now, I can't get anybody to actually, to commit to buying it. And I said, I have to ask you. I said, did anyone die in the house? And he got really quiet. And under New York State, or under Indiana State disclosure laws, that if someone has died in the house, you don't have to disclose unless you were directly asked. And so I directly asked him. So there was this long pause, and he said, well, yes, my mother-in-law passed in the house. And I said, okay. I said, that's good to know. But so I felt like it was her. She was probably still wondering what the heck was going on. All these people were traipsing through her house. And
Right. Yeah.
it was an absolutely gorgeous house. So, I've got a lot of haunted real estate stories from, other realtors that I worked with. I actually have quite a file compiled of all the potentially haunted properties that they encountered. But I think you have to be a little more attuned to this. I mean, I would get a story or two, here and there from the other agents, but, they had been in this business for, 30, 40 years. And I was having all kinds of experiences just my first year in real estate. So I think I'm a little more attuned to it, and I just maybe, pay more attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think probably a little bit of both. Yeah.
yeah, I think they will come seek you out. And I always do say that there's a part of you that you do have to believe before you will see.
Yeah.
And once you have that little bit of belief, and if you can just kind of open your mind up a little bit, sometimes then things will show themselves to you.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right about that. Um, real quick, when you mentioned the pyramids, I love the pyramid stuff. I love reading all that stuff and learning, and I always call it like my Richard Dreyfuss moments when I'm on YouTube and I'm checking all the video stuff. I get the Richard Dreyfuss from Close Encounter thing where he's going crazy, building his the Devil's Tower, or is that what it's called? Yeah,
Yeah, it was the
right.
Devil's Tower thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's what I call it when I start to Richard Dreyfuss myself. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I even got my little pyramid right here.
See, you need to go. See, it's calling
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I think so. I think you're absolutely right about that. Have you ever been scared, like legit scared?
Um, it kind of yes and no. A lot of people ask that, and once again, the perception is that ghost hunting is really scary.
Right.
Ghost hunting for me is very cerebral. It's like you're paying attention to what's going on. So the times that I've been, like really creeped out is when for certain that there's no one in the room next to you and you're hearing loud footsteps. That's scary, but it's more in a threatening way. I've been startled before. I've been touched before, and that it's more of a startling thing.
Okay.
Or I'd say kind of just, being intensely creeped out. I can't say that I've never run from a location, knock on wood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same here. We many years ago, I lived in a house and it had a lot of activity, and we all experienced it, my kids and I, and we never got like the impression that it was had any kind of ill intent or there was anything threatening or that he was trying to scare us. It was, I mean, it was definitely freaky. We definitely got startled and even scared, but we never like, okay, it's trying to do something to us or it's trying to
Mm-hmm.
run us off. We never got that impression. And we all saw a shadow figure at some point in time, or a black figure, a
Mm-hmm.
black mass. We were all touched or poked at one time or the other. Yeah. But I think it was just the original owners of that house just letting us know that they were still around. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah. So
Most likely. I mean, I've had experiences that if they had gone on, then it probably would have, elevated. I had a shadow person manifest in front of me. This is at my old house upstairs in my office. I was sitting at my desk working, and I looked up, and there was a full blown pitch black shadow man. It was the kind wearing the hat, standing there,
Yeah.
like no more than like 6 feet away from me. And this is in broad daylight, the sunlight streaming in, in my window. And then just like that, he vanished. Now, if that encounter had gone on long enough for my brain to kind of realize, what was going on, or if he'd taken like, movement toward me, yeah, then I would have been tripping all over myself to get away.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that
And
same entity. Yeah. Yeah. I saw the same entity. The Hat Man is what I call him.
Mhm.
When I was like 20 years old. I was still living at the house with my mom and dad. I saw him in my room, and years later, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 years later, my niece, she got married, and she moved in with my mom, and they were staying in that room, and her husband at the time saw the same guy in that room too. So that was pretty cool that he saw it and I saw it in the same room. And then
Yeah,
I've
it's
known other,
very.
yeah, I've known. I had a friend of mine. I guess he kind of invoked it because he was fooling around one night after he moved into a house that someone died in. Actually committed suicide, and he found out the day they were moving in that someone had committed suicide, and he started turning the light off and on and was telling his wife, "Jack's gonna get you. Jack's gonna get you." The name of the guy, and after that, they had all kinds of, and they actually wound up leaving that house. They didn't even stay in there, maybe 6 months, and they got out of there because it was just too intense, and it was very, very frightening for them. But yeah, I think people can invoke that kind of stuff if they're not careful. You know?
Yeah, I like to tell people that, we have sovereignty. And, if you take a stand, and again, about protecting yourself and protecting your space, never ever put out a welcome mat. You don't want to inadvertently give permission. It's like the old vampire legends, you have to give them permission to come in. And I really
Right.
think that to that, you don't want to invoke, you don't want to let them know that they can just come in. You have to be really clear about protecting your space and your physical self.
Mhm. Yeah. And you mentioned watching the unsolved mysteries. I thought about that. I was actually, me and my friend Walter were actually on that podcast. They have an unsolved mystery podcast, and we were on that show. If you ever want to look it up, it's the Bigfoot in Texas episode. I can't remember what episode number it is, but that's what it is.
Oh,
Um,
I'll go back, I've probably seen it. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah. So, what got you into the UFOs and the MUFON for that matter? What got you steered in that direction?
Well, I had been doing the ghost hunts, and then we heard that there was a MUFON chapter opening up, and it was kind of funny because the whole team, we all kind of chatted about it. And I'm really open-minded, and that was something that was really interesting to me. I think I saw a UFO when I was a teenager, not any kind of up close, but when we'd be laying out under the stars, and you'd be seeing things move that you knew weren't planes up there. So I was kind of interested in the phenomena. And some of the other investigators, they said, well, those people are crazy. And I said, that's the same thing they say about the
Yeah.
ghost hunters. And I
Right. Yeah.
said, maybe there's something to that. And then later my friend acquiesced. She goes, yeah, you're right, we think they're crazy and they think we're crazy. And I said, it's time for us to start looking at this phenomena in a general. I think it's all facets of the same phenomena, or it's all somehow connected. And at that time, the book about Skinwalker Ranch had come out, and they had coined the term of high strangeness. And so even MUFON itself was starting to get around the idea that what people were seeing might not necessarily even be physical craft, that there could be other dimensional, who knows what it could be. But and a lot of people that were having sightings were also having paranormal activity kick up in their house, and that whole associated phenomena. So anyway, so I joined MUFON, and then sure enough, my very, very first case was a gentleman. And when we went in to investigate and we interviewed him, it started out, the story is that he just saw a red excuse me, a red light that kept floating around. So he tells us his story. And while he's telling us his story, he's chewing his thumb. By the time he finished, he had chewed his thumb down to the quick, and it was actually bleeding. So
Wow.
there was a lot more going on than, him just seeing, a red light in the sky. And I started asking him, I said, if you had strange dreams, if you had anything else that has happened. And he said, someone keeps ringing my doorbell at 2:00 in the morning and they won't stop. He said, I would even just stand outside the door. And as soon as it would ring, I would open it up. And he said, my wife's all upset. She doesn't know what's going on. And, he was like, just make it stop. So there was clearly more, than just this, this light. And then, we later sent him to be hypnotically regressed. And yes, he was actually having more contact and was possibly, had been abducted. So, just on the surface, it seems like maybe nothing at all, but, he was having the full blown associated activity. And we had another case. She was also being taken, but she was having these huge flashes of light that were happening in her bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually witnessed them. We actually captured them on camera. We were all staked out at her house, and we saw these huge pops of light, just like somebody had used a flash. And I said, who used their flash? And we all said, no, everybody said, well, we're not using our cameras. We're not using flash. And I said, well, where'd you see it come from? And everyone thought that the directionality was somewhere else. So it was kind of weird that we all experienced it. We didn't actually capture the flash on camera, but we captured all of us talking about it. So it was almost more like it was a mental projection. But what we did capture on camera is while all this was going on, the bedroom door opened itself up. So all on its own. So it's just a myriad of activity and different phases, I think, of this phenomena. And it's just really hard to tease apart, like they're trying to do at Skinwalker Ranch. What is terrestrial, what is ghost, what is alien, what is interdimensional. And the same thing, that's my feeling about Bigfoot. I mean, as a biologist, I could see that, it actually could be this physical creature that, does leave behind tracks, and it does leave behind hair samples. But there's been no remains, and it's always in so much association with UFO sightings that, which phenomena is it? Is it terrestrial? Is it interdimensional? Is it both? Does it, change these different phases of matter? And there's just so many questions there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm on the side of the fence of the flesh and blood, but I don't discount anything else that anyone else is telling me because I think
Mhm.
man, this is a strange world, right? This is a strange universe. You don't know what's going
Mhm.
on or what's happening, and there's stuff that we're just never going to know.
Mhm.
So I don't. So when someone comes to me and they tell me, and I've had family tell me they have seen Bigfoot like disappear right in front of their eyes, right? So I don't discount that, and I'm not, and I would never tell anybody that's not what you saw, you know. So
Mhm.
I'm not like I'm a hardcore flesh and blood only. Don't bring anything else to
Mhm.
me. I don't do that to people. And I think, for the reasons why we talked about it in the beginning, you don't want to, get anyone to shut up or shut down.
Mhm.
Uh, I want everyone to
Yeah,
feel like they can
there's
come to me and talk
I
to me.
I think there's totally evidence for both. And I think it's possible to be both. I mean, I think the observer is determining the outcome. I mean, that's the core principle of physics is, light can go from being a wave to a particle and back
Right.
again. And so maybe that's what you're seeing. The particle phase is when it's a flesh and blood creature, and then when it zoops back into being a wave or energy, that's when it's gone right in front of you. I mean, to me, it would explain, shadow men. Shadow men, when they pop up, they'll stop a laser. They are actually matter, because only matter can stop a laser beam.
Right.
But then they'll just vanish. and and with the physics as we do understand it, how is that possible? You can't convert directly from matter into energy without explosion of heat. So I don't know, there's still some things there that we do not understand, nor are we even really close to understanding.
So the light that y'all saw in that room, what color was that light?
It was bright white.
Okay. All right.
But now her leading up to when she first started having her UFO experiences, she claims that the very first thing that happened is that she was seeing blue orbs. She saw these small blue orbs of light start to drift through her backyard, and then they were drifting through her house.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that, and if you see me looking down, I'm just writing notes. The reason why I asked that is I had met someone and we got really, really close. And she was an abductee, and she had told me, she goes, "Look, I'm just letting you know that if if we continue this, you're gonna start having experiences." I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm okay, right?" And I mean, just in a matter of like a week, I started having stuff happen here. And one of the things that happened here was my room filled up with a blue light. And uh, at this time, I was telling Walter about about this woman, and he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "She told me that all this stuff was gonna start happening or whatever." And I was like, just I didn't want to say I blew it off, but I kind of really didn't think much of it.
Mhm.
So I was telling him about this, and like I said, like a week later, when I saw the blue light, my whole room just filled up. Like it looked like somebody was welding. And
Mhm.
so we went out bigfooting, and I was telling Walter about this blue light, and man, his eyes got this big, and he had a friend with him, and he's like, "Hey, did you hear what he's talking about?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah, we saw a big blue orb in their room that filled up, that filled up. But I didn't see an orb. They both saw an orb. Yeah, so I thought it was pretty coincidental that we both saw a blue light, even though they saw an orb and I didn't. But what was weird
I,
about it is that when I saw the blue light, I just went right back to bed, like nothing, just like, oh, my room's blue, and go back to sleep. So I thought that was kind of weird.
that yeah, that's also evidence that something strange
Yeah,
happened. A lot. Yeah,
yeah,
I think before the show, you and I had chatted about that. That I would interview people and they'd have some crazy thing happen. All the treetops were snapping off, and I'd say, "Well, then what did you do?" "Well, I just went back to bed." And it's like, that's not a natural response. Just,
yeah.
oh, okay, I'm just going to go back to sleep. Most people would, be up for the rest of the night and the next 3 days, and and pacing around because of it. But the blue light, I think, is always really interesting to me. I was just reading a scientific article a couple weeks ago, and they determined that if neutrinos had a color, it would be blue.
Hmm, okay.
So, in my medium friend, she said whenever she is like seeing an entity, seeing a spirit, she said it'll sort of be surrounded with like this blue light.
Hmm, that's
So I
interesting
don't know
too.
what it is about that part of the color spectrum, but it's sort of associated with UFO activity. And that's how I got. I don't believe that I had ever been taken. I don't know if that's true any longer, but the more I got involved in the UFO community, and I was going to all the conventions, and I had gone out to the Open Minds convention out in Phoenix one year, and it was Dr. Lear was there when he was still alive. He was the surgeon that was removing implants from people,
Right.
and his technician was there, and they were scanning people, and I got scanned. I didn't have any implants. And then he also had this psychic or this reader, and he was just sort of doing like a little intuitive scan of people. And he scanned me, and he said, "You haven't been taken yet." And he said, "But they want to let you know that they have noticed that you're curious about them. And so if you are expressing curiosity about them, they're going to start getting curious about you." And
Right.
I took that very much to heart. And that's when a lot of weird things started happening in my house. I started hearing like really loud electrical discharges a sound that I couldn't even begin to describe to you. It sounded like it was in my house. It was like a huge transformer had just like, discharged, or like a Van de Graaff machine had just discharged a huge amount of electricity. And there was, nothing wrong. Nothing blew up in the house. My son saw a UFO out his bedroom window. I was down making dinner, and he's like, "Mom, there's UFO outside." I'm thinking, "Oh God, no, there's not." And I'm thinking, it's like he's looking at, I think he's looking at something, way far away. And so, I come upstairs, and he's like, "Well, it took you long enough. It's gone now." And I said, "Well, where was it?" And he goes, "Oh, it was just right out here." It was like, and he points, and he said, "Well, it was going all the way around the house. It was about 10 feet away from my window." And it's like, holy
Oh wow.
schmoly, like,
Yeah, you could have said that, right?
you could have yelled a little bit louder.
Yeah.
And then he was at his dad's one weekend, and his dad is still to this day a commercial airline pilot. And so his dad took him out flying, and and as soon as he gets home, he's sending me UFO pictures. He was like, "Oh yeah, I saw this it looked like this big black sphere that was, flying, when Dad and I were out flying." And I said, "Did you say anything to your dad?" And she's like, "No, he'll think I'm crazy." But he photographed this craft. So that started getting a little bit too close to home. It's like when you start, messing with my kid, and
Yeah.
I was like, and then I started having, white vans parked in my cul-de-sac. I believe my phone was bugged. I had a weird Men in Black mist encounter. We were joking when we were having our technological issues here tonight that it must be the Men in Black, but related to one of the cases that I have already spoken about. Since MUFON was a new chapter, and we were having a big monthly meeting, we got local newspaper coverage. And the local newspaper coverage, I was president of the chapter, and I was supposed to be speaking that next week. So I got interviewed, and I had taken the reporter out. And I didn't take him to the witness's home, of course. We kept him confidential, but we went to an area, I'd say probably within a couple of miles of this gentleman's house. And I was pointing in the general direction of where this gentleman was seeing these red lights in the sky, which not so coincidentally was toward Camp Atterbury, which is a huge National Guard installation in central Indiana. So I didn't think very much of it. This all comes out in the paper. I was getting ready for the meeting that week, and in that morning, I woke up and I had lost my voice completely. So whenever I lose my voice when I'm speaking about things, that's always really interesting to me. So I had really bad laryngitis, and so I had called the state director, and I said, "Stu, I can barely squeak anything out." And he said, "Okay, don't worry about it. I'll speak in your stead or whatever." And I said, I'm just going to go back to bed. I'm going to, try to feel better here. So my partner at the time, my ex-husband, had gone to the meeting, and he came home, and oh my gosh, he came flying in the door, and he's like, "Come on, you got to grab a cup of coffee. You got to hear about what happened at this meeting." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I miss one meeting. Like, what the heck happened?" And he said, because I'm really, really glad that you didn't attend. And then, he tells me all this. And I always say that, spirit will protect you. Spirit will save you. And in this case, I really think there was something else that did protect me. He said, there were 4 men that showed up looking for me. They wanted to talk to that lady that was in the newspaper. And then, so as soon as they said that, everybody, they all just shut up, and they're like, "Well, she's not here." And they're like, "Where's she live? What's her name?" And they're like, "We're not telling you that. Why do you want to know?" And they're like, "Well, we need to interrogate her. We need to do this. We need to do that." And I'm thinking, well, if you were really an intelligence agency, it would have been pretty easy for you to figure that out. But he said the weirdest thing is two of the guys, I think two of the gentlemen left, but the other two, they just stayed and they just kept acting very strangely. He said at one point, and they were dressed very strangely, kind of like Men in Black, but they weren't the well-dressed, dapper Men in Black. They were just strangely. People always report that sometimes they're just sort of strange, and that's the way these guys were. He was wearing like a white t-shirt, just sort of inappropriately dressed. Well, he kept whipping his phone out and holding his phone up to his head, and he's going, "We got to shut these people down. They know too much. We got to shut them down." And so everyone's like, "Okay, what's going on?" And so the room had pretty much cleared. The meeting was over. These gentlemen were still sort of lurking around, and it was kind of getting uncomfortable. I think they thought they might going to have a problem with these guys. And so my ex and his son, and there was another investigator there, and then the state director, they were going to kind of keep an eye on this guy. And then the next thing they know, they looked up and he was gone. And they couldn't understand where he went because he was sort of backed into a corner of the room, and there was no way he could have left the room without going past or like between them. He literally vanished. And so, yeah, that was the story I got when he came home, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what the hell? It was just this one, it was just this one sighting case. But like I said, as it turned out, it was a lot more than, just seeing some, red OBLs in the sky. And
Right.
I don't know if it was bringing the weirdos out, because, that happens. It brings out the crazies, but I don't know. My life just got so weird for a while.
Right. Yeah. My first sighting was, man, it was I bet close to 20 years ago. I was fishing in Galveston, and the gentleman I was with was off to my right hand side. I don't know, 40, 50 feet to my right, and I hear him goes, "Hey Joe, what's that?" And I look over to him, and he points up to the left. He goes, "Yeah, what's that right there?" And we look up, and about 300 feet above us, there's this round craft. It's a perfect disc. We can only see the bottom of it, so I don't know what the top looked like. But it was just a round uh, disc, and it was just right above us, so slow and so smooth. I mean, no lights, no shaking, and no noise. And we could hear right down the strip from us, maybe 3 or 4 miles down the strip. There's a little landing. There's a little airport, like single engine planes, and you could hear them buzzing in. This thing was right above us and made no noise, and it just kept on going right along the coast until it disappeared. And it took about 5 minutes for it to get out of sight because it was just cruising so slow. I mean, too slow in my opinion for anything other than a helicopter. Uh, to maintain that airspeed, they have to maintain to stay in the air. This thing was just almost floating, but just so smooth. And then about last year, me and Walter, we went out bigfooting. We came back to his house. It was late. I don't know, 12, 1 o'clock, and we're in his front yard. And I'm like, okay, man, I gotta take off. And I happened to just look up at the sky, and we see these two lights come like this at each other, and they stopped, and then they made a couple little circles, and then they took off in opposite directions. And I mean, I had my phone out. I'm trying to record it, but the dumb iPhone, it doesn't see nothing but black sky.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the second time I saw it, and that was during this time that all this other kind of weird stuff was happening here at my house, and I was having because I meditate, and I was having weird visions, and I guess there were dreams I was having too of like creatures or beings. I call them creatures because they look weird. They were like standing like around my bed looking at me, and yeah, they were. It was I had some weird stuff. I came out of the shower one day, and my bedroom door is right here, and it was closed, and I saw this little figure back up and go through the door. Yeah, it was crazy. It was. I've had some fun stuff happen too. So,
Yeah, yeah, it happened. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, it's been with them their whole lives. But I do know that if you do start hanging out with abductees, yeah, you will start to have experiences too, because
right.
that's when things were so crazy for me.
Yeah,
People in
and when I
moonshine used to say, "Oh well, I'll never meet a contactee," and I'm like, I've got like at least 5 or 6 on speed dial in my phone. It's like I don't know what you guys are doing,
yeah
but yeah, at the
yeah
time, it's like I just kept bumping into so many of them.
right. And we had a um, well, I say we. I had this dream of getting like on a bus, kind of. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I know when I got on this bus, it went up, and it was long and white, and there was people sitting in rows, and I just remembered the first person I saw was this young girl. And she had a hickey on her neck, and I just remember that hickey for whatever reason. I just remember that hickey. That was one of the strangest dreams I ever had. It was just so weird. I remember being like in a tube filled up with water. Yeah, I had some weird stuff happen. It was a kind of crazy time for me. But yeah, that's kind of the stories of my little life, my little adventures. And like I said, I haven't even had a Bigfoot sighting yet. That's what I spend most of my time looking for. Yeah,
Well, maybe one will come out of a UFO at some point.
yeah, maybe.
I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, one of my contactee cases, she said that. Yeah, she said when she was on the craft, she said, yeah, there were Bigfoot on the craft, and
Hmm.
she got the feeling like they were like helpers. I mean, the famous the famous sort of sighting that started all that was at Skinwalker Ranch when one of the scientists had the night vision goggles on, and
Hmm.
he was watching this orb float around, and he could only see it because he had night vision goggles on, and it got down
Right.
to the ground, and a Bigfoot climbed out of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and another investigator standing right next to him who did not have the night vision goggles didn't see any of that. And so it was almost in this different spectrum of light. But
So, do you know if has anyone ever like received phone calls from, I don't know, the Men in Black, if you want to say that, or any other entities that tell them basically to shut up about what they're talking about? And
I don't know about phone calls. I received, me and my husband, we received sort of a veiled threat from the FBI through one of our other friends. One of our friends was testifying in a FBI case, and he was on Facebook, and he was trying to type something, and as he typed, he kept seeing everything like someone else was on the other side, like erasing it all.
right. Hmm.
And then there was like a message that popped up, and let him know, sort of a veiled threat, that they knew that he was getting involved with MUFON, and in that, as far as like a direct threat, well, see, that's the thing. A lot of people think that the Men in Black are, like some, top secret, or some black ops group. The only case that I know of, and this is still pretty much a mystery, is the John Tosti case that was in Indiana. He was in Bloomington, and he and his buddy were out hunting, and they stumbled on, I think they saw a craft or something, and then they had like military men in black come to their house and interrogate them about what they had seen, and he had been threatened about it.
Yeah, and
I've
I
never
asked
had
that.
like actually, like I said, just white vans and just kind of like suspicious things going on. Nothing that was really a direct threat.
Yeah, we had and I say we. I was going to Walter's house during all this time, and of course I'm into Bigfoot, and had UFO stuff going on, and he lives like out in the country also. And I exit the freeway, and I'm heading towards his house, and there's these two SUVs right behind me, black ones. What the hell's going on, right? So I pull into a gas station. I go in there. I go inside. They leave. Go to Walter's house, and I'm telling him about this, and his friends like, just listen to our story, and I'm there maybe a couple hours, and she's like, okay, well, I gotta take off. I'm going home. Okay, bye. See you later. So she calls 10, 15 minutes later. She goes, hey, I'm at that gas station. Those two black SUVs are parked out here on the side of the road. Oh shit, that was kind of crazy. But yeah, that's I don't know if it was related or not, but it was kind of creepy anyway. Um,
Did you ever have any sightings of the black helicopters?
yes, Yes, I actually had
because
military.
they won't have an N number on their tail. They will not have FAA markings. We got a lot of reports of them, that people that were abductees or contactees were having them kind of circle around their house
Right. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
follow
During
them.
that time, they were here constantly. They were here. I got a recording of them. Yeah.
Mhm.
And even military helicopters. Yeah. But so man, it's already been an hour, believe it or not. Uh,
It's
it's
interesting stuff, but
yeah, the stuff
yeah,
that goes
yeah,
by.
they use other intimidation tactics and
Right,
just
right.
kind of watch you.
Well, you have anything you want to promote? I don't. Do you have anything going on that you want to talk about or?
Um, I've been doing a lot of podcasting on XV Planus. He's a friend of mine. He has a podcast. He's John Killian. He's really interesting. You can check out X
Oh
Planus. My Facebook page is public, so you can come follow my adventures on there. It's linked to my Instagram, which is Jill_Weaver. And that's the only things that I have really going on right now. I've been just doing a few random podcasts. I have some really big trips coming up this summer. I'm going to go back out to the UFO campground in Utah and go peek over the mesa at the ranch that
oh
shall
yeah,
not be named.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah, we
excited
got to
about
have you
that.
on again so we can talk about that because we talked about talking about that. We didn't even get to that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I
cool.
went out last September, and yeah, a few interesting things happened. I mean, nothing like
That's
certainly ground
right.
shaking, but
Yeah.
it was
Well, like I
interesting. It
said,
was interesting.
yeah, I'm sure you got a lot more to talk about, and like I said, we'll try to work that out. We'll get you back on again. Um, but yeah, well, cool. I really do appreciate you coming on. Um, like I said, is there anything else you want to say or
No, that's
any
great.
words
Thank
of
you so
wisdom?
much for having me. And yeah, I'd be happy to come back on, and we can talk some more about the weirdness that we've experienced and
Well, cool beans. All right.
compare.
Well, um, yeah. Okay. Well, don't go anywhere. I'm gonna talk to you real quick. And for everyone else,
Okay.
like I said, it's recording. You have any questions, man? Hit me up. Beyond.woodline@gmail.com, and we'll get those answers to you guys. And everybody, good night. Good night, Jill.
Night.